this week in football was not ideal.
Inside, and a beauty! Hall running free! Brees Hall inside the 10! He's gonna score!
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to episode 2 of the Talking Jets with Tigo podcast. My name is Tigo, and I will be your host today. And before we get into the video and before we get into the podcast, guys, a couple of announcements. If you are unaware, we're doing a 2,000 subscriber giveaway. We are so close to 2,000 subscribers. We are 160 subscribers away from getting to the 2,000. And at 2,000 subscribers, I will be doing a 2,000 subscriber live stream, and we will be giving away one NFL jersey to a lucky viewer of the live stream, and you also got to be subscribed at the time. It's going to be a good time. I'm excited about doing this giveaway, so come on, join up. The other thing is, I'm going to announce this right now because unfortunately we didn't get any calls or anything like that, but if you want to call the show and leave a voicemail, the number is right up here, 689-999-0430. Give me a call, drop in a message, leave a question, whatever it is that you want. I want to answer your questions at the end of the show and get you guys involved. So, with all of that aside, let's talk about this week in the NFL, around the NFL. Not ideal when you want to look at the different situations of, what happened around the NFL. Obviously, I think the biggest concern, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but obviously the biggest problem was the New York Jets and how we lost to the Patriots. Wasn't very, very good at all. And we went from having the possibility of leading the AFC East from one week to now we are outside of the playoffs looking in. And now we've got a massive question mark at quarterback because Zach looked absolutely abysmal. But we'll talk about that when we talk about news from Florham Park. But, the Bears are looking lethal. And we got some good news if you're a Jets fan. It's never good news when this happens. But it does look like Justin Fields' shoulder is hurt. And so there's a possibility that he might not play on Sunday. And we know that the Bears' defense isn't that great and isn't that lethal when it comes to getting home or anything like that. So I'm expecting that they're going to play Zach against the Bears and that we're going to see a bounce back game from him, but we'll talk about more of that a little bit later. A big thing this week to me was the Colts really took it to the Eagles. The Eagles literally won that game because I think the Colts missed a field goal, and the Eagles are starting to look human, like really, really human, and they're starting to kind of come down to earth. I said this at the time that when they were undefeated, they were really big frauds. I didn't believe in them as being an undefeated team. I didn't shy away from that. I didn't try to hide that opinion. I made it very clear. Now, you get to play the people in front of you, right? And that's who you got to play, and their record is their record because of the schedule that they had. But I didn't think it was that impressive. I didn't even think they were the Super Bowl favorites out of their conference, let alone the division, when it came to the teams that I believe that could actually make the moves, because I just don't necessarily look at that Eagles roster and say, you know what, they're ready for the Super Bowl, especially when you look at like some of the teams in the NFC. But 17-6 out of Philly was honestly surprising to me. When you're playing an Indianapolis Colts with a high school head coach and Jeff Saturday, who was working at ESPN, or I think before he was hired, like it or not, believe in him or not, Jeff Saturday has Indianapolis playing really, really hard, and it's really interesting. It's a cool story to find. The Saints over the Rams honestly surprised me because what are the Saints and what's going on with the Rams? Is this a Super Bowl hangover? Like, I don't know what it is, but the Rams look bad, and I don't understand really why. I know Matthew Stafford's hurt, but I'm pretty sure he played in this game. Like, it's just a weird set of circumstances. I know I was watching the Browns and Bills game while I was also watching the Jets game. Did anyone else really believe in the Browns at the beginning of that game? Like, they led, I think it was 17-3, and then Buffalo just scored like 23 unanswered points, and like they ran away with that game. I thought everything was going to go the Jets' way that day, and obviously it didn't. The Bills came back and won. The Jets lost. Wasn't a good day. The Lions over the Giants, absolutely mind boggling. I think the Giants are coming back to what they're supposed to be, and this is like the fall back to the median. I'm sorry. And the Lions overperforming that offense, holding back that Giants offense, and primarily Saquon Barkley, and then scoring 31 points. It's impressive. Aiden Hutchinson had himself a game, and man, is he good. The Broncos and the Raiders game was absolutely one of the worst football games to watch, but was so much fun when you look at it. Like, these are both teams that I think are sprinting to the bottom when it comes to certain situations. I know the Broncos don't have a first-round pick, and the Raiders aren't really good with their first-round picks, but my expectation is that the Raiders are going to try to blow everything up, and they should be sprinting to the bottom, and I'm expecting a Devontae Adams trade, a Derek Carr trade, or a cut on Derek Carr, because who's going to take on that Derek Carr contract? Like, something's coming with Vegas, and it's not pretty. The Cowboys and the Minnesota Vikings, 40-3 by Dallas over Minnesota. What did Minnesota do or not do? Like, they looked so bad, and Dallas looked out of this world good. That defense is playing phenomenally well, and it's super interesting when you look at the fact that Minnesota goes from one game versus one of the best teams in football, super close and all of that stuff, and Justin Jefferson looking like the best receiver in football, and Kirk Cousins throwing dimes and making plays, and that defense and that to playing the Cowboys and absolutely falling apart. I don't know what happened to Minnesota. I'm really interested to see what Minnesota is going to do this week or like this coming week against the Patriots, because this seems like a bounce back game. We know that the Patriots aren't a good football team offensively, and the Minnesota Vikings have a pretty good defense. It's going to be an interesting game, especially because the game is in Minnesota. So let's see what happens there. And then obviously we got Bengals at Steelers. That was actually a game that was a lot closer and a lot more fun than I expected. I don't think the Steelers are a good football team, and I think the Bengals are a much better football team than the Steelers are. But there is like the TJ Watt difference. TJ Watt jumping up and snatching that interception is inhuman. Like, you shouldn't be able and you shouldn't be allowed to make plays like that, but he constantly, and I mean constantly, does. Absolutely insane. Chargers Chiefs, man. Chargers take the lead, 4 points there at the end, but they gave too much time to Patrick Mahomes. He marched down the field and he wins that game. It's one of those situations where it's just like, you hope your defense steps up, but when your defense is facing the best quarterback in football, it's hard for you to stop a guy like that. And he went down and he matriculated the ball down the field and he got it into the end zone, and boom, game over. Chiefs win. And that's good, right? Because I pivoted. I originally wanted the Chargers to win because I assumed the Jets were going to win. But after the Jets lost, I became a Chiefs fan, and boom, they did it. And the 49ers absolutely annihilating the Arizona Cardinals. It was just, I recorded the podcast the night before, so I just saw the game. The game ended a couple of hours ago. And Jimmy G looked absolutely phenomenal today, throwing the ball very, very well, accurately, on time. Kyler Murray missing another game. And is it a coincidence that Kyler Murray gets injured the same time frame that Warzone comes out? I don't know, guys. I'm not that kind of guy, but there is that conversation to be had. But that's kind of the news around the NFL that I kind of want to talk about, right? We now see Miami Dolphins now are the number 2 seed in the AFC, and I don't like that at all. The New England Patriots now have the tiebreaker over the New York Jets, even though we say have the same record. They have swept us at this point, so that's not good. And we're trying to catch up, with Cincinnati and all of those things. So we've got to do better to try to catch up to them, if you're expecting that from the Jets. But let's move on to our next segment, the Gotham Green Gazette news from Florham Park. And there's a lot of big news that we've got to talk about, right? And I think the biggest story piece is going to be the Robert Saleh press conference. If you haven't heard it, go watch it. And he was very non-committal when he was asked about Zach Wilson. His words were basically saying, we're going to evaluate the position, we're going to look at everything like that. And it's just like, it's interesting when you look at something like that and you have that conversation, because a couple of weeks ago, the conversation around Zach was, no, Zach Wilson is our starter. And I believe that. And even after that game, I was like, come hell or high water, Zach is going to get the next 7 games. We need to know what Zach Wilson is, and you want to evaluate him one more time. But after that presser, my leash that I'm giving Zach is he's got one half of football to prove it. And the Chicago Bears are the perfect opponent for it, right? They don't have a pass rush that's going to be lethal and that's really going to challenge our offensive line. The expectation is that we should get Max Mitchell and Nate Herbig back, so the right side of the offensive line should be fixed. LDT is going to be probably on the active roster and ready to play in case Nate Herbig can't play. We know that LDT is better than Dan Feeney when it comes to that, so we should get a better offensive line. Hopefully Corey Davis is back, but we know that defense in Chicago is not good right now. And the thing that we need from Mike LaFleur, and if I'm Robert Saleh, this is the message that I am preaching, and this is the message that I am pushing to my offensive coordinator and my offensive guys, is I want... Sorry about that. I want an incredibly aggressive game plan. I don't want us running the ball that much. I want this game to be on Zach Wilson's shoulders. He needs, and we're going to do it in the first half, I want us to be aggressive. I want him to have to read and dissect and do all of those things on offense, because I need to know what Zach Wilson is right now, because he's too hot and too cold. He goes from being one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL and every Jet fan having to go online and defend the guy when he beats Buffalo and he out-duels Josh Allen, and then he goes to New England and he completes like 3 passes for 5 yards, gets a total of 2 yards in the second half, which is just unacceptable. And looks like easily the worst quarterback in the NFL, to the point to where there are backups that would have looked better than Zach Wilson. You can't be that hot and that cold, and we need to see what you are, and the Chicago Bears are exactly the team to do that. If he can't light it up against the Chicago Bears, and if he can't put this team in a position to win that game, the conversation needs to pivot from, okay, we've got our quarterback, now we're going to start filling, and now the conversation needs to be, we need to go find a quarterback. Now, my opinion goes as such. I don't think we should be trading up in the draft to go get another quarterback. I haven't watched any quarterback film, but I don't know if any of the guys coming out of this class are going to be graded as high as we had Zach graded, right? Because Zach had an elite arm, and you hope that would translate to the NFL. Now, from my evaluations from last year, Bryce Young, while short, is accurate, on time, and has a strong enough NFL arm. And that might be what we could get. CJ Stroud is an insane athlete, but he needs time to develop in the NFL, and he needs to build up some NFL acumen. So that might be another Zach Wilson-esque project. I'm not on board with the Levi Levis or whatever his name is. I think he's too old. I don't want to do that. Hendon Hooker just tore his ACL, but I would never touch Hendon Hooker with a 35.5-foot pole. So I don't think the answer is in the draft. And I think that, one, because of the fact that, like, the amount of draft capital that you would have to give up to move up in the draft to go get a quarterback would just be astronomical, and we still have holes on this roster, and I know that we can fill those holes in free agency possibly, and even in the later parts of the draft, but a first-round safety, a first-round linebacker, a first-round defensive tackle, to me, is more appealing than trading those things to go up and get a quarterback, especially when we look at the upcoming quarterback market. Now, I was having this conversation with one of my friends, and in an ideal world, what I would do is I would go find this year's Marcus Mariota, or a couple years ago's Ryan Fitzpatrick and what he was to Tua, right? They brought in competition for Tua Tagovailoa, and anytime Tua did anything bad, they would just bench him for the other guy, because they said, you know what, we do need to develop this guy, but we need to win games, and right now we don't have that. I have absolutely zero faith in any of the quarterbacks that are in our locker room right now. I don't think that any of them are going to be good enough to win games right now, and that's a problem. So let's go find who that guy is. Who is the person in this offseason that we bring in to be not Zach Wilson's replacement, but his competition? And I don't know what the answer is there, but if we do come to the conclusion that, you know what, it's straight up time to replace Zach Wilson, I think that there is really only two options. I think option one is Jimmy Garoppolo. We know that he's going to hit free agency. He's familiar with the system, and we saw what he just did on Monday Night Football. And Jimmy G went to the Super Bowl with San Francisco with some of the with this coaching staff. The familiarity is there, and he's accurate with the football. The only thing that concerns me with Jimmy Garoppolo is the injury history, and we still play on a turf field, and you know we're gonna get another Vinny Testaverde situation if we went out and got Jimmy G. We're going to load up the roster. Jimmy G's going to come in. Boom, he's going to get hurt. And then we're going to end up having to run Zach again because I think Zach's on the roster no matter what next year. And at that point, why do we sign Jimmy G at all? It just doesn't make sense. But I think the more realistic option, and I know a lot of people aren't a fan of this, but that's just because people don't watch football and don't know how to evaluate football and quarterbacks and different things like that. But for me, I look at it and I go, the guy that I would target would be Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is going to get cut from the Vegas Raiders, and it's not because of his performance. I think it's going to be because they can't afford him. They literally can't afford to fire their head coach because they couldn't pay his contract and a new head coach's contract. And I think they're going to try to get out from under Derek Carr's contract. No one's going to trade for Derek Carr on that contract. So you can go out and you can acquire Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr on this team is 8-2, straight up. And I think that 100%. I think Derek Carr is suffering from the fact that they don't have a coach in Vegas at all. They don't have an offensive line in Vegas. And if you watch Vegas games, like, the play calling is just absolutely abysmal. It's all on play calling. It's not on the players. Derek Carr on this team with our coaches and our scheme is accurate, is on time, and he wins this game. And for me, I think that's where I would want the Jets to go if we were going to go the route of we're going to replace him with a veteran. And in an ideal world, I want to bring in a veteran competition to push Zach. I still believe that Zach might be able to turn it in, but after that, turn into something as an NFL quarterback. I have a hard time giving up on a guy who's got elite raw talent like Zach does. You know, he's athletic. He's got the arm. It's just about processing and, honestly, accountability. He wasn't holding himself accountable after that game, and that's a problem to me. You got to hold yourself accountable. And to have the defense, like the question be asked, do you think you let the defense down? And then for him to turn around and say, no, unacceptable. And that's the only way to say it, unacceptable. He's got to do better. He's got to be better, and he's got to hold himself accountable. Now, I will say this is Zach Wilson's first ever bad press conference. He has not had a bad press conference before. This is his first ever one, but you kind of assume maybe the emotions got to him after that game. That's a game that everyone was expecting, probably them too, was expecting that they were going to win, and they didn't. And they didn't win because of him. And after watching the All-22, I'm not blaming the offensive coordinator, because if you watch the All-22, you will see wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs open all day long. There was at least 3 or 4 touchdown plays where Zach Wilson just didn't see. Not that he didn't see. I know he saw him. I saw his eyes. There was nothing else he could have been looking at, and he didn't trust himself to make that throw. The biggest problem with Zach Wilson is that he plays scared. When he plays scared, he is the worst quarterback in football. And when he plays loose and free and in the system, he is, in my opinion, a top 12 quarterback in this league. Look at the last quarter of the Pittsburgh game, that fourth quarter drive. He was not dinking and dunking, but just dicing up that secondary and throwing the ball willy-nilly. Look at the Tampa Bay game from last year. We know what he can do when he's loose, when he has nothing to lose, when he's not scared of the opponent in front of him. When he plays scared, he is the worst quarterback in football, period. There's a great example of this play. It's all over Twitter. Go on Michael Nania's Twitter. He talks about it. But this is the play that broke me just like it broke Nania, which is Denzel Mims is streaking up the middle of the field, and he beats everybody. No one is following him. The zone collapses. He is in the middle of a cover 2 set by himself, and Zach Wilson is staring at him. And he decides, and instead of going, you know what, I'm going to throw this ball and trust my arm, he looks at his check down, throws the check down, and that's it. Instead of getting a touchdown, getting 6 points, we got 4 yards. And that's because he didn't trust his arm. Another example of that is CJ Uzomah streaking up the middle of the field, crossing right in the numbers where he's supposed to be good. Zach Wilson, between the numbers, is a really efficient quarterback. Watches CJ Uzomah get open and then doesn't throw the ball at him and gets sacked. That wheel route to Ty Johnson. So many people like to complain about Ty Johnson. But the truth of the matter is, and the fact that Jets fans need to accept, is that Ty Johnson is the only running back on our roster who has home run ability. Michael Carter is our most elusive back and our best running back. James Robinson, in my opinion, is a great between the tackles, one cut, get upfield, and drop a shoulder into a guy running back. And they're both better than Ty Johnson. But what I'm saying is neither one of those guys are as dynamic as Ty Johnson is in space. When you get Ty Johnson into space, he is a home run threat every time. The problem with Ty Johnson is he has a hard time getting into space. They run him on that wheel route, and he is open. If Zach Wilson just throws the ball in front of him so that he catches it in stride, I think 100% Ty Johnson beats the safety to the edge, and he gets it, and he takes it to the house, and we've got another 6 points right then and there. In those 4 plays or 3 plays that there was one where Garrett Wilson streaks across the middle, and Zach Wilson's staring at Garrett Wilson, doesn't throw the ball. He's scared. I think he takes a sack. Like, there are 2 plays right there which would have ended in 6 points. 2 plays that would have ended in 6 points, or at least put the Jets, if it didn't end in 6 points, in a position to get Greg to get the field goal. But Zach Wilson didn't do it. We lost this game because of Zach Wilson, but we lost this game because Zach Wilson was playing scared, and he can't play scared. But let's talk about some positives. This defense continues to dominate. Quinnen Williams should be, in my opinion, in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, and he should be the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year. The effectiveness statistically that he is getting from up the middle is unmatched by anyone in the NFL right now. And the only person who does this stuff on a regular basis is Aaron Donald, and he's not doing it this year because Quinnen Williams has taken up that mantle. I wasn't ready to say it before, but I will say it now. Quinnen Williams is the best interior defensive lineman in the league. You give him however much money he wants. I don't care. You pay the man and you keep him on your roster. And then the rest of the defense played absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. There was a couple of things, like DJ Reed was playing like 12 yards off of Devontae Parker. And that was weird to me. Or was it Jacoby Myers? Doesn't matter. One of the 2 guys. He was playing like 12 yards off of him, playing an insanely soft zone. And I'm like, dude, you can make a play on Noodle Arm Mac Jones. Like, don't be scared of Mac, like, at all. But I need to see more. Honestly, I need to see more from this offense. And I don't mean the offensive play calling. I think Mike LaFleur has done an excellent job, and he will get thrown in the rumor mill this offseason as a head coaching candidate. I don't know if he gets an interview. I don't know if he gets that conversation, but he absolutely is doing everything he can with this team, with this offensive scheme. And I know a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? He hasn't been able to develop Zach Wilson. Guys, developing a quarterback is a 2-way road, right? Not only does he need to be a good teacher in Mike LaFleur, and we don't know if he is or if he isn't, but Zach Wilson also needs to be a good student. And one of those things isn't working. And right now, I tend to lean more on the fact that Mike LaFleur knows what he's doing and that he can teach his system and teach his quarterback and train up his quarterback, and that Zach Wilson is failing it. Because if you look at these lists and if you look at these people who are being considered for head coaching positions and people who are being considered for offensive coordinator positions, you know who keeps coming up consistently on a lot of these lists? And I looked this up when I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a Houston Texans fan, and we were trying to find the talent pool of people who were going to be the Houston Texans' next head coach possibly. I kept seeing Mike LaFleur's name coming up on these lists as a potential head coach candidate, but I also kept seeing Rob Calabrese as a potential offensive coordinator hire for one of these teams. Our guys offensively are getting the job done and doing the things that they need to do, and Zach Wilson isn't living up to that expectation, and it sucks. And I have been the biggest Zach Wilson supporter. I defended him through everything when it came to his performance all of the time. I defended the guy, but he just isn't getting the job done right now. And unfortunately, I might be trading my 2 jersey in this offseason for a 4 or whatever Jimmy G wears. I forget what he wears without looking at it over the top of my head. We might be looking for another answer at quarterback this upcoming offseason. And I hate that I'm saying that. Last but not least, let's end it with voicemails, which, like I said, I don't have. So, guys, again, one more time, give the show a call any day of the week. I check every day. You can also text this number. If you don't want to message it, text it. But it is 689-999-0430. Again, that's 689-999-0430. Guys, thanks for listening and hanging out in the Talking Just with Tigo podcast, episode 2. This wasn't a fun week, and it's not going to be a fun week when it comes to this conversation, especially with Robert Saleh being non-committal when it comes to Zach Wilson and the position. But I think ultimately you got to play Zach Wilson. I think that's what we're going to do. But if he starts failing to win us the game, if he starts failing to accomplish anything by the halfway mark, you gotta move on, and you got to bring in Mike White. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but that's what you got to do. All right, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button on the way out. And last but not least, you know what it is. Go Jets.